The gardens smelled like home, which was strange because Daniel Reed had never been to half the planets represented in the biodomes. Still, something about the mix of growing things and quiet spaces reminded him of the community garden back in Seattle where his grandmother used to take him. He sat on a bench made from recycled hull plating, unwrapping the sandwich he had made that morning. 2 more days until his meal credits refilled, so he had been careful. Bread, some protein paste that almost tasted like chicken, and a few leaves of actual lettuce that cost him more than he wanted to admit. Around him, the Galactic Academy Station Harmony hummed with the business of educating the galaxy's future leaders. Most students ate in the main cafeteria, where climate controls kept everything comfortable and the food dispensers offered hundreds of options. Daniel preferred out here. The gardens were free, quiet, and most importantly, empty. Other students found the varying temperatures uncomfortable as they walked between Earth-normal zones and sections mimicking other worlds. Daniel just wore layers that he took a bite of his sandwich and opened his datapad, reviewing notes for tomorrow's exam on interspecies communication protocols. The material was dense, full of rules about proper greetings and cultural taboos. He had chosen xenobiology as his major because he genuinely wanted to understand other species, but sometimes the academy made it feel more like memorizing a giant rule book than actually connecting with anyone that a sound caught his attention. Scraping like claws on stone, Daniel looked up from his datapad. The volcanic rock section of the gardens sat about 20 meters away, arranged to mimic some planet he could never remember the name of. Dark stones absorbed heat from artificial sun lamps, creating the scorching environment certain plants needed. Nothing moved among the rocks, but he could have sworn he heard something that he returned to his notes. Probably just the environmental systems adjusting. The sound came again, followed by a soft chirp that was definitely not mechanical. Daniel set down his sandwich and stood slowly. Academy safety briefings had covered dangerous fauna that sometimes hitched rides on supply ships. He should probably call security. Instead, he found himself walking toward the volcanic section, curiosity winning over common sense. Between 2 large black rocks, something moved. Small, scaled, definitely alive. The creature emerged into the light, and Daniel's breath caught. He had seen pictures in his xenobiology texts. Everyone in the galaxy knew what dragons looked like, even the young ones. This hatchling was barely the size of a house cat. Its scales a dull gray that should have shimmered like polished metal. Its wings hung at odd angles, one clearly damaged, membrane torn, and healing poorly. The creature's ribs showed through its sides. Daniel knew 3 things about dragons. First, they were among the most powerful species in known space. Second, they were incredibly proud and rarely interacted with other races. Third, even hatchlings could be dangerous when threatened. The dragon looked at him with eyes that held far too much intelligence for something so small. It chirped again, a sound that somehow conveyed both fear and desperate hunger. Every safety protocol Daniel had ever learned told him to back away and contact the authorities. Dragons were protected under about 17 different galactic treaties. Interfering with one, even to help, could create diplomatic incidents. The hatchling had probably gotten separated from its family somehow, and professionals should handle the situation. The dragon swayed, weak, and Daniel made his decision. He walked back to the bench, grabbed his sandwich, and returned slowly. The hatchling watched him with wide eyes, tensing as if to flee despite clearly lacking the strength. Daniel sat down on the warm rocks, about 2 meters away, and broke off a piece of the sandwich. He sat on the ground between them and slid it forward gently. The dragon didn't move. Daniel waited, keeping his breathing calm and his posture relaxed. His grandmother had taught him that patience worked with all creatures, whether they had 2 legs, 4, or wings. After what felt like forever, but was probably only a minute, the hatchling crept forward. It sniffed the food, then looked at Daniel as if asking permission. "Go ahead," he said softly. "You need it more than I do." The dragon ate delicately, despite its obvious hunger. When it finished that piece, Daniel offered another. They continued this way until half the sandwich was gone. The hatchling's movements became a bit steadier, its chirps less desperate. Daniel noticed the damaged wing more clearly now. The membrane had torn badly, and without proper care, it might not heal right. He had basic first aid training, though applying it to a dragon seemed ambitious at best. Still, he pulled out his emergency kit from his backpack. Moving very slowly, telegraphing every motion, he approached the hatchling. "I want to help with your wing," he explained, not sure if it understood words, but hoping his tone conveyed intent. "This might be uncomfortable." The dragon watched him but didn't flee. Daniel used sterile strips to carefully support the damaged membrane, creating a makeshift splint. The hatchling whimpered but held still, seeming to understand he meant no harm. When he finished, he offered the rest of his sandwich and his precious fruit ration, a real apple that he had been saving for a treat. The dragon ate everything, then did something unexpected. It moved closer and curled up against Daniel's leg, making a sound like a purr crossed with crackling fire. Warmth radiated from its small body. Daniel sat there until his datapad reminded him about his next class. When he finally stood, the hatchling looked up at him with those intelligent eyes. "I'll come back tomorrow," Daniel promised. Same time. He gathered his things and left, unaware that the Academy's security AI had logged the entire interaction, and completely unaware that the small dragon was already calling out to its family in frequencies humans couldn't hear. Daniel's boots made soft, echoing sounds in the corridor as he headed toward advanced astrophysics. He had checked the gardens earlier that morning, bringing another carefully rationed meal, but the small dragon had been gone. Probably for the best, he told himself. Its family had likely found it, and professionals could provide proper care for that damaged wing. Still, a small part of him felt disappointed. The corridors of Academy Station Harmony were designed to accommodate dozens of species, wide enough for the massive crowbar and tall enough for the willowy ethery. Right now, they felt unusually crowded as Daniel navigated between clusters of students. A group of Relian scholars blocked part of the hallway, their tentacles gesturing animatedly as they debated something in clicks and whistles. Daniel squeezed past them politely that he noticed other students staring at him more than usual. A pair of Velcrin warriors, their scaled faces typically stoic, watched him with what looked like shock. 3 human students he recognized from his dorm level whispered to each other while pointing in his direction. Daniel checked his uniform, wondering if he had spilled something on himself that morning. Everything seemed normal. The stairs continued as he climbed the ramp toward the lecture hall. More students stopped their conversations to watch him pass. A few pulled out their communication devices, recording him for reasons he couldn't understand. Daniel felt his face heat up with embarrassment. Had someone posted something about him on the station network? Maybe that video of him tripping in the low-gravity gym had finally made the rounds. The entrance to Professor Aldrin's lecture hall stood open ahead. Daniel could see other students already seated, the tiered room designed so everyone had a good view of the central teaching platform. He stepped through the doorway and immediately realized something was very wrong. Every single student turned to look at him. Not just curious glances, but full-body turns accompanied by gasps and a few shouts in languages he didn't recognize. Professor Aldrin, a dignified Cetarian whose 4 arms usually moved in careful, measured gestures, stood frozen at his teaching podium. "Mr. Reed," the professor said slowly, "do you have something you wish to tell the class?" Daniel opened his mouth to say he had no idea what was happening, but Professor Aldrin's upper right arm pointed toward the massive windows that made up the outer wall of the lecture hall. Daniel turned and felt his stomach drop. Dragons. Dozens of them, maybe 50 or more, ranging in size from creatures barely bigger than the hatchling he had helped to massive adults with wingspans that had to measure 15 meters. They perched on every available surface of the station's exterior, clinging to antenna arrays and landing platforms, their scales glittering in the light of a nearby star. All of them faced the window. All of them were looking directly at him. I don't," Daniel stammered, that a security alarm began blaring. Automated voices in multiple languages announced a code amber situation, warning all students to remain in their current locations. Through the windows, Daniel could see more dragons arriving, their powerful wings carrying them through the vacuum of space without any apparent difficulty. Some landed on the hull, directly outside the classroom, their faces pressed close to the transparent aluminum, eyes fixed on Daniel with unwavering focus. The other students backed away from him as if he carried a disease. A Brosian warrior, easily twice Daniel's size, actually climbed over a desk to put more distance between them. Professor Aldrin's usually calm demeanor cracked as he activated his emergency communicator. Security, this is Lecture Hall 7. We have multiple dragons exhibiting unusual behavior. They appear to be watching one of my students. One of the smaller dragons, perched right outside the window, made a melodic sound that resonated through the hall. The others responded in harmony, creating a song that Daniel felt in his chest. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Something small and gray squeezed through an air vent near the ceiling. The hatchling from yesterday, its wings still wrapped in Daniel's makeshift splint, glided clumsily down and landed directly on his shoulder. It chirped happily and nuzzled against his cheek, its body warm and its scales surprisingly soft. The lecture hall erupted in chaos. Students screamed. Professor Aldrin backed against his podium, all four arms raised defensively. Two security officers burst through the door with weapons drawn, then froze when they saw the dragons outside and the hatchling on Daniel's shoulder. Everyone remained calm, one security officer announced, though her voice shook. Do not make sudden movements. Daniel stood very still, aware that every eye in the room, human and alien and dragon, was focused on him. The hatchling on his shoulder purred contentedly, completely oblivious to the panic it had caused. Through the window, the largest dragon Daniel had ever seen landed on a platform. Its scales were the color of ash, marked with patterns that suggested great age. It looked directly at him and slowly, deliberately, lowered its massive head in what could only be described as a bow. The other dragons followed suit, all bowing in unison. Professor Aldrin's communicator crackled. All personnel, this is Director Callis. Mr. Daniel Reed is to report to my office immediately. Security team, escort him carefully. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to separate him from the dragon on his shoulder. The hatchling chirped again and settled more comfortably against Daniel's neck. Mr. Reed, Professor Aldrin said quietly, his Cetarian features pale with shock. What exactly did you do? Daniel thought about the sandwich, the apple, the careful bandaging of a torn wing. I share my lunch, he said simply. Outside the window, 50 dragons watched and waited, their ancient eyes holding secrets that Daniel was only beginning to understand. Director Callis had an office that matched his personality, cold, efficient, and designed to intimidate. The walls displayed commendations from various galactic organizations, all praising the Academy's commitment to peaceful coexistence. Right now, with dragons covering half the station's outer hull, those awards felt somewhat ironic. Daniel sat in a chair clearly not designed for humans, the hatchling still perched on his shoulder. Across the expansive desk, Director Callis examined him with eyes that had evolved for hunting in low light. The Calarian director's reputation for maintaining order was legendary. Students whispered that he had once negotiated a peace treaty between two warrior species using nothing but logic and barely concealed threats. Explain, Callis said, his voice carrying the hiss common to his species. Daniel told the story honestly. The gardens, the hungry hatchling, the shared sandwich, the bandaged wing. It sounded absurd even to his own ears. How could something so simple create this situation? You realize, Callis said slowly, that we have had to evacuate 3 entire sections of the station because students refused to attend classes with dragons watching through the windows. Parents are demanding refunds. 2 ambassadors have filed formal complaints. All because you gave a creature your lunch. Before Daniel could respond, the office door opened. Professor Mira Wells entered, one of only 5 human professors at the Academy. She taught advanced xenobiology and had published extensively on cross-species interaction. Behind her came someone who made even Director Callis straighten in his chair. The dragon filled the doorway despite the office's generous dimensions. It had taken a form somewhere between its true size and something that could navigate station corridors, a compromise that still left it towering over everyone present. Its scales shimmered like molten silver, and its eyes held the weight of centuries. Ambassador Dreek, Callus said, rising from his chair. Thank you for coming. Director. The dragon's voice resonated through the room, speaking perfect galactic standard. I understand there has been some excitement regarding one of your students. Dreek's gaze shifted to Daniel. The hatchling on Daniel's shoulder chirped and bowed its small head respectfully. Dreek's expression, as much as Daniel could read dragon features, softened slightly. The young one is called Spark, Dreek said. She wandered from her clan's migration path 3 weeks ago. We feared her loss to the void, or worse. Your quick actions save her life, young human. Daniel started, but Dreek raised a clawed hand gently. You acted with kindness that expected no reward. In dragon culture, this creates what we call a gratitude debt. The clan has come to honor this debt. Professor Wells leaned forward. Ambassador, surely a simple thank you would suffice? Having 50 dragons camping on the station's hull is creating significant problems. 53, actually, Dreek corrected, and more arrive hourly as word spreads through the migration channels. You must understand, Professor, that dragons do not give thanks lightly. To save a clan member, especially a youngling, creates bonds that transcend simple gratitude. Callus's tail twitched with agitation. Ambassador, with all respect to dragon traditions, this academy serves thousands of students from hundreds of species. Many of those species have complicated histories with dragons. Your people's presence is causing fear. Fear born from misunderstanding, Dreek replied. Which brings me to why we remain. We are not here merely to honor Mr. Reed, though that would be sufficient reason. We are here to learn. Daniel blinked. Learn what? Dreek turned to face him fully. Humanity is new to galactic society. Only 3 generations have passed since your people achieved faster-than-light travel. Yet in that short time, you have made alliances with species that had warred for centuries. You integrate where others segregate. You cooperate where others compete. We wish to understand how. We're not special, Daniel said quietly. We just try to see people as individuals instead of representatives of their species. Precisely. Dreek's eyes gleamed. A philosophy that most civilizations take millennia to develop, if they ever do. Your treatment of Spark exemplifies this. You saw a hungry, injured child, not a dragon, not a potential threat or opportunity, just someone who needed help. Professor Wells nodded slowly. You want to study human behavior. We want to learn from it. Dreek corrected. Dragons are powerful, yes. Ancient, yes. But we are also proud, isolated, and slow to change. Humanity offers perspectives we lack. Daniel's simple act of sharing his meal demonstrates a mindset we find intriguing. Callus leaned back in his chair. And this requires 53 dragons blocking station operations because, Dreek said patiently, tradition demands we honor the debt. But we are willing to adapt our traditions if it serves a greater purpose. We propose a cultural exchange. Young dragons would attend academy classes, learning alongside students from other species. Adult dragons would share our knowledge of physics, stellar navigation, and other subjects where our long lives have given us unique insights. In return, we learn about cooperation and empathy from those who seem to practice it naturally. Daniel's mind raced. Spark chirped softly on his shoulder, and he absently stroked the small dragon's head. The hatchling leaned into the touch, making that purring, crackling sound again. You want dragons to become students here? Callus asked slowly. We want to turn disruption into opportunity, Dreek answered. But we will only proceed if Mr. Reed agrees to serve as liaison. The clan trusts him. We will follow his guidance on integration. All eyes turned to Daniel. He thought about his classes, his limited budget, his plans to simply finish his degree and maybe find work on a research station somewhere quiet. None of that included becoming a bridge between humanity and one of the galaxy's oldest species. Spark nuzzled his neck, trusting and content. Okay, Daniel heard himself say, but I'm going to need help figuring this out. Professor Wells smiled. That's what teachers are for. The first dragon to attend introduction to quantum mechanics arrived 15 minutes early and broke 3 desks just trying to find a comfortable position. By the time class actually started, Professor Chun had requisitioned reinforced platforms and rearranged the entire lecture hall. The dragon, a juvenile named Frost whose scales shifted between blue and white depending on the light, apologized profusely in 3 different languages. Daniel watched from his usual seat, Spark curled in his lap like a scaly cat. The past week had transformed the academy in ways he was still processing. Structural engineers worked around the clock installing proper landing platforms. Translation devices got updated with dragon dialects. The cafeteria had added a section serving the high-temperature foods dragons preferred, which mostly involved very fresh meat and minerals that other species considered inedible. Not everyone was happy about the changes. "This is ridiculous," Roger Blake muttered from the seat next to Daniel. Roger was his assigned roommate, a human from the Mars colonies who had strong opinions about Earth natives being too soft. "We're bending over backwards to accommodate them. When do they start accommodating us?" "They're sharing their stellar navigation data with the astronomy department," Daniel pointed out. Professor Wells said it's worth decades of research. "That's not the point." Roger's voice carried more edge than usual. "The point is humans always do this. We try to be friends with everyone, and it makes us look weak. Other species respect strength, not kindness." Frost accidentally knocked over an equipment stand with one wing, then scrambled to clean it up while apologizing again. Several students flinched away from the dragon's movements, clearly still nervous despite a week of integration. Daniel didn't respond to Roger. They had been having variations of this argument for days, and it never went anywhere productive. He focused instead on Professor Chin's lecture about particle entanglement, taking notes while Spark occasionally batted at his stylus. After class, Daniel had liaison duties. Ambassador Dreek had set up a rotation where young dragons shadowed different departments each day, learning how the academy functioned. Today, Daniel needed to escort 3 hatchlings to the biology labs and somehow prevent them from accidentally destroying anything expensive. The hatchlings waited in the designated meeting area, their scales gleaming under the station's artificial lights. Beside Spark, there was Ember, which made Daniel wince at the common name, but the dragon had chosen it herself after learning English, and a quiet hatchling named Ash who rarely spoke but watched everything with intense curiosity. "Ready for biology?" Daniel asked. Ember's tail swished excitedly. "Will we see the genetic sequencers? I have been reading about DNA modification techniques and have questions about cross-species compatibility." "Probably. I'm just a student too, remember. I don't have all the answers." "But you have the right questions," Ash said quietly. It was the most Daniel had heard the small dragon speak all week. That is what Ambassador Dreek says. Humans ask questions that others assume they already know the answers to. The biology lab occupied one of the station's older sections, where gravity generators occasionally fluctuated and the walls showed their age. Professor Wells met them at the entrance, her face lighting up when she saw the hatchlings. "Perfect timing. We're examining samples from a newly discovered planet, and I thought your perspectives might be valuable. Dragons have visited far more worlds than our databases contain." The lab session went better than Daniel expected. The hatchlings were careful with the equipment, asked intelligent questions, and even offered insights about similar organisms they had encountered during migrations. Other students, initially wary, gradually warmed up to having dragons as lab partners. Ember's enthusiasm was contagious, and even nervous students found themselves explaining concepts to curious hatchlings. During a break, a Calarian student named Cirrus approached Daniel. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior last week. I may have overreacted when the dragons first arrived." Daniel remembered. Cirrus had been one of the students demanding the dragons be removed from the station. "It's okay. Change is scary. My homeworld had conflicts with dragons centuries ago," Cirrus explained. "Old wars that ended before my grandparents were born, but the stories persist. Working with Ember today, I realized she's just a student like me. Curious, nervous about getting things right, excited to learn. I let old stories blind me to present reality." "That's very understanding of you," Daniel said. Cirrus's tail coiled thoughtfully. Or perhaps humans have a talent for making others see past old prejudices. My parents would say I'm being naive, but I think they're wrong. The galaxy changes, and we must change with it or be left behind. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and coordination meetings. By evening, Daniel was exhausted. He headed back to his quarters, looking forward to a quiet night of studying. Spark flew alongside him, having gotten better at maneuvering through corridors without bumping into things. Roger was already in their shared room when Daniel entered. His roommate's expression was cold, angry in a way Daniel hadn't seen before. "We need to talk," Roger said. Daniel set down his bag. "Okay, what's wrong?" What's wrong?" Roger stood, his posture aggressive. "You and your dragon pets and this whole integration farce. You're making humans look like fools. We should be establishing ourselves as a power in galactic politics, not playing nursemaid to oversized lizards. They're not pets, Roger. They're people. They're weapons." Roger's voice dropped low. "Weapons that could turn on us at any moment. And you're teaching them everything about how we think, how we operate, giving them tools to manipulate us. You think you're building bridges, but you're just making us vulnerable." Spark hissed softly, sensing the tension. Daniel picked up the hatchling, holding her protectively. "I think you should request a room transfer," Daniel said quietly. "This isn't working." Roger smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Already submitted the paperwork. I'll be out by tomorrow. Just remember, when this all falls apart, some of us try to warn you." He left, the door sliding shut with finality. Daniel sat on his bed, Spark curling against his chest. Outside the window, adult dragons patrolled the station's perimeter, their presence now a normal part of Academy life. 3 weeks into the integration program, the Academy had settled into a new rhythm. Students no longer jumped when dragons flew past windows. The cafeteria had learned to stock the right minerals. Professor Aldrin's astrophysics class had become the most popular on the station because Frost could explain stellar phenomena from actual experience of flying through them. Daniel sat in the gardens where it all started, reviewing his notes for an exam, while Spark practiced short flights between the different environmental zones. The hatchling's wing had healed well, and she could now glide for almost 30 seconds before needing to rest. Her scales had regained their proper shine, shimmering gray with hints of copper when the light caught them right. His communicator buzzed. A message from Director Callis requesting his presence at an emergency meeting. Daniel's stomach tightened. Emergency meetings were never good news. The director's office was crowded when Daniel arrived. Ambassador Dreek had compressed himself into a smaller form to fit, looking uncomfortable but determined. Professor Wells was there, along with several species representatives Daniel recognized from the Council Liaison Office. Their expressions ranged from worried to outright hostile. "Mr. Reed," Callis began without preamble, "we have received credible intelligence about a threat to the integration program. Security intercepted communications planning an attack during tomorrow's cultural celebration ceremony." Daniel felt cold. "What kind of attack?" A Brosian security officer activated a holographic display. "Explosive devices planted in the ceremonial platform, designed to injure both dragons and humans, make it appear as if one side attacked the other. The goal is to end the integration program and expel dragons from the Academy." "Who would do this?" Daniel asked, though part of him already knew. "A coalition calling themselves the Preservation Front," the security officer explained. "Mixed species membership. They believe maintaining separate cultures is essential for galactic stability. They view human-dragon cooperation as a dangerous precedent." Ambassador Dreek's eyes glowed with barely contained anger. "They fear change, progress, the possibility that the old ways of thinking might be wrong. We're canceling the ceremony," Callis announced. "Too dangerous to proceed." "No," Daniel said firmly. Everyone turned to look at him. "That's exactly what they want. If we cancel, they win. They prove that integration can't work, that fear is stronger than cooperation." "Mr. Reed," Callis said with strained patience, "I appreciate your optimism, but we cannot risk lives to make a philosophical point. What if we don't cancel, but we change the approach?" Daniel's mind raced. "Spark noticed something was wrong this morning before I even got the message. She kept trying to pull me away from certain areas. Dragons have senses we don't. What if we use that? Ambassador Dreek leaned forward. You propose using hatchlings as detection systems. I propose we work together like we've been practicing. Daniel stood, pacing as the idea took shape. Dragons can sense things humans can't. Humans can navigate political situations dragons find confusing. Other species have their own strengths. Instead of canceling, we turn this into a demonstration of why integration works. Professor Wells nodded slowly. A joint security operation. Dragons detect threats. Human and alien security teams respond. It shows cooperation in action. The Brosian officer looked skeptical. This is highly irregular. Security protocols don't include using students as detection assets. The hatchlings aren't students right now, Dreek said thoughtfully. They're clan members protecting their extended family. There is precedent in dragon tradition for this, and it would send a powerful message. Callus was quiet for a long moment. If we do this, security maintains full operational control. Dragons assist, but do not engage directly. Agreed? Dreek inclined his head. Agreed. The next morning arrived with ceremonial banners hanging throughout the main concourse. The celebration was meant to mark 1 month of successful integration, a symbolic gesture of progress. Students from dozens of species gathered, though many stayed near the exits, clearly nervous. Daniel stood with Spark and the other hatchlings, trying to appear calm. They had spent the previous evening practicing, teaching the young dragons to signal specific types of danger with different chirps and movements. Security teams were positioned throughout the area, dressed in ceremonial clothing but fully equipped. The ceremony began with traditional greetings in multiple languages. Representatives from various species spoke about cooperation and understanding. Daniel barely heard the words, focused instead on watching Spark and the other hatchlings as they moved through the crowd, apparently playing but actually scanning systematically. Ember suddenly went rigid, her scales shifting to a darker red. The danger signal. Daniel touched his communicator twice, the prearranged alert. Security teams moved casually but quickly, converging on the location Ember had indicated. Under a decorative platform, tucked behind ceremonial draping, they found the first device. Controlled detonation protocols activated immediately. Ash signaled next, then Frost. 3 more devices, all carefully hidden, all found because dragons could detect the specific chemical signatures and electromagnetic patterns that security scanners had missed. The ceremony continued uninterrupted. Most attendees never knew how close they had come to disaster. Only when it ended did Callus make an announcement, praising the security team's diligence and the hatchling's assistance. Later, in a private meeting, security presented their findings. Roger Blake's name was on the list of conspirators, along with students from 3 other species. The Preservation Front had members throughout the academy, all united by fear of change. They wanted to prove integration was dangerous, Professor Wells said quietly. Instead, they proved why it's necessary. Alone, our security would have missed those devices. Together, we stopped them. Daniel felt tired more than triumphant. Roger was my roommate. I ate meals with him, studied with him. How did I miss what he was planning? Ambassador Dreek placed a gentle claw on Daniel's shoulder. Because you chose to see the good in him rather than assume the worst. That is not a failing, young human. That is precisely why this integration works. You extend trust first, not as a reward for proving worthiness. Spark chirped and climbed into Daniel's arms. Outside the windows, adult dragons maintained their patrol, and inside the station, students from across the galaxy went to classes together, learning that cooperation was stronger than fear. The Galactic Council chambers were designed to intimidate, and they succeeded. Daniel had never seen so many important beings in one place. Representatives from 47 member species filled the tiered seating, their attention focused on the central platform, where he stood with Ambassador Dreek and Director Callus. Spark perched on his shoulder, her presence both comforting and terrifying. One wrong word here could undo everything. The council speaker, an ancient ethery whose translucent body glowed faintly blue, activated the recording systems. We convened to address the incident at Academy Station Harmony and evaluate the experimental integration program between Dragons and Galactic Society. Mr. Daniel Reed, you may present your testimony. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he accessed his datapad. Then he stopped. Numbers and statistics wouldn't matter here. He set the datapad aside and spoke from his heart. 3 months ago, I shared my lunch with a hungry child. I didn't think about species or politics or galactic implications. I just saw someone who needed help. That's what humans do. We see individuals, not categories. We offer kindness first and ask questions later. Some people think that makes us weak or naive, and maybe sometimes it does. But it also means we can build bridges where others only see walls. He gestured to Spark. This is Spark. She's smart, curious, brave, and she tells terrible jokes in 3 languages. She also happens to be a dragon. Working with her and her clan these past months has taught me more about cooperation than any textbook ever could. The beings who tried to sabotage our program feared what we were building. They thought different species working together threatened their power or their traditions. They were right to be afraid, but not for the reasons they believed. A Calarian counselor leaned forward. Explain. Cooperation does threaten the old ways, Daniel continued. It threatens the idea that strength only comes from isolation and dominance. It proves that different perspectives make us all smarter, different abilities make us all more capable, and different cultures make us all richer. The conspirators weren't afraid of dragons. They were afraid of change. Ambassador Dreek spoke next, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. The Council asks whether dragons and other species can coexist peacefully. I submit that we already do. Young dragons attend classes alongside Calarians, Broxians, and humans. They study together, debate together, and yes, sometimes disagree. But they resolve those disagreements with words, not violence. They learn from each other. This is not theory. This is proven reality. Director Callis presented security reports, academic performance data, and incident statistics. The numbers supported what Daniel and Dree claimed. Despite early fears, dragon integration had actually reduced conflicts across the academy. Students from traditionally hostile species cooperated more when dragons were present, united by shared goals rather than divided by old grudges. The council deliberated for 3 hours. Daniel waited in an antechamber, watching through a window as ships arrived and departed from the council station. Spark had fallen asleep on his lap, exhausted from the stress of so many strange beings. Finally, the summons came. The council speaker's glow had brightened to almost white. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, this council reaches the following conclusions. First, the integration program at Academy Station Harmony is deemed successful and will continue. Second, the program will expand to include other educational facilities across council space. Third, Mr. Daniel Reed is appointed as official liaison for human-dragon cultural exchange, with full diplomatic status. Daniel blinked. I'm sorry, what? You created this bridge between species, the speaker explained. You should help others build similar connections. Unless you decline? I'm just a student, Daniel protested. I don't have training in diplomacy, or you have something more valuable, interrupted a human counselor, Ambassador Lisa Chun. You have the ability to see past categories to individuals. That's a skill we can't teach in any academy. Accept the position, Mr. Reed. Humanity needs voices like yours in galactic affairs. Daniel looked at Spark, who had woken up and was watching him with those intelligent eyes. He thought about Ember's enthusiasm for learning, Frost's patient explanations of stellar physics, Ash's quiet wisdom. He thought about Cirrus overcoming centuries of cultural fear to work alongside dragons. He thought about all the students who had learned that cooperation was possible if you were willing to try. Okay, he said, but I'm keeping my enrollment at the academy. I still need to finish my degree. The speaker's glow flickered with what might have been amusement. Approved. Back at Academy Station Harmony, news of the council's decision spread quickly. Daniel found himself surrounded by well-wishers from dozens of species, all congratulating him or asking questions about what happened. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. Professor Wells found him in the gardens that evening, sitting on the same bench where he had first met Spark. "How are you handling all this?" she asked. "Honestly, I'm terrified," Daniel admitted. "I'm 19 years old. I don't know anything about being a diplomat." "You know the most important thing," Wells said gently. "You know that every being deserves compassion and respect, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. The rest is just details." Spark chirped and launched herself into the air, her wing fully healed now. She glided in graceful circles above the gardens, joined by other hatchlings who had become Daniel's friends over the past months. They played in the artificial sky, their scales catching the light like living rainbows. Daniel watched them and smiled. He had shared his lunch with a hungry child, and somehow that simple act had changed his life, changed the academy, and maybe, just maybe, change how species saw each other across the galaxy. His grandmother would have said that kindness always comes back to you, multiplied. She would have been right. Above him, dragons danced in the light, and Daniel knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he wouldn't face them alone.